Okay, folks, welcome to week 14 of the course. Here today, we have the last of our set of nonprofit managers visiting and sharing their leadership experiences with you. We'll talk about Mafe Canton in a moment. Before that, I just want to give you a little bit of housekeeping that I have. There will be a reflection paper off of this. Well, there we'll get to that. A reflection paper, I emailed that to you. Very short little paper to write up during the coming week on what you've learned from those three managers. So take a look at that. That'll be due next Wednesday. And then also I'll add that, so that's in your email inboxes. I'll also add that we'll start into a sort of a simulation over the next 3 sessions on a community health center. I think Mafe could ace this one without any problem, given her experience. But we'll talk that through starting on Monday. We'll also talk through the American Red Cross case, and that's where we'll go come Monday. So I'm going to get out of the sharing, and let's see. Really pleased to bring Mafe in. She was a student of mine about 10 odd years ago in the MPA program and has done state government work as well as nonprofit work since then. She's a good public servant in different ways. And the MPA degree, if you continue on to that, or the MBA, they're almost like a Swiss Army knife. You know, they just have a good set of tools that you can muster to whatever challenge comes up across the POSD skills that we've been talking about quite a bit in the class. So she's put a lot of those to work. Daytime, Vice President for Human Resources at North Shore Community Health. And we haven't really talked that much about community health agencies in the class. We can revisit that on Monday if folks want to, or even ask Mafe over the next little while. And then she'll tell you about her volunteering role for NEACAL, the New England Association for Colombian Children, over several years. I'm not even sure how long that relationship has been going on, but there are a pair now even splitting out to having these couple of different contrasting public service directions, and quite different ones. In addition to raising 3 rambunctious boys and her husband Eduardo is a great guy as well. Just really happy to bring Mafe on board today. So I'll let you share.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. Again, it's very exciting to be back to Suffolk, at least in this virtual space that we have. I had such a great experience at Suffolk. A double RAM. I did my bachelor's in communication and political science. And then I went back and loved Suffolk enough that I wanted to go back and get my MPA. And the reason why I got an MPA is because I started in state government shortly after I graduated from my bachelor's at Suffolk. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do in my career and sort of what got me to this point. So I started working in public service at the Department of Education, doing HR and diversity work. HR, because I love working with humans, and I believe in the talent that people have and the potential that they bring to organizations. And ultimately, they're the most precious asset that any organization can have. Nothing happens without people, right? So to me, that's where I wanted to be. And in terms of my work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a passion of mine. It's a need, and it's more of a moral responsibility for me more than anything. So I had the opportunity to combine those two things and was able to work in public service for about 10 years in both of those capacities. One of the most interesting experiences I had working in public service was working for the MBTA. So I'm sure all of you have seen the MBTA and, any delays in schedules and all of that, but that is such a powerful organization, such a complex organization for sure, especially if you think about the human resources aspect of it and the diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect of it. It's an organization that has a long history of challenges in those areas, but also opportunities as well. It's one of the largest employers, definitely in the Boston area, but across the Commonwealth. So, highly unionized, highly legacy, it's the oldest transportation system in the United States. So it's a very complex, very interesting workplace for sure, and definitely a defining moment in my career by far. If I had to say, which is the job that really defines you, absolutely my work at the MBTA. Also had the opportunity to work at the Department of Transportation for a number of years. And then, you know, after working in public service, I said, I have to try something else. So I decided to go and try the private sector. I was like, private sector, perhaps more money, perhaps, you know, more benefits, who knows? It turned out to be, it was a great experience. Also working in HR leadership and DEI, but it just wasn't, it wasn't me. It wasn't for me. I've always been a mission-driven person. I wanted to make sure that I worked in an organization that fulfilled sort of all the check boxes, my moral check boxes, and the things that I care about, and definitely serving the community. I think, you know, I've always been someone who's been focused on social justice. It's just part of who I am, and I needed to be in a situation or in a space where I could act that out and sort of make a difference, while also, you know, putting food on the table. So after a short tenure of a year working in the private sector, I went back to, you know, a mission-driven organization that really just aligns with my values and my community and the needs of my community. So I decided to take on this role as Vice President of HR for a nonprofit community health center based out of Salem, Massachusetts. It's a multi-site clinic, but we have about 225 employees right now. And as many nonprofits, we have our challenges in terms of, you know, resources, but also a lot of opportunities to build relationships with the community, with other, you know, coalitions with other nonprofits around the area, because ultimately we're addressing issues of social justice, issues of inequities, and systems that have been designed to not necessarily cater to the needs of what the community looks like now. So, you know, working in partnership with all these different community organizations and sort of carrying, you know, the community forward in different aspects from our perspective, from the health equity aspect, but also education and job readiness, and, you know, just creating opportunities is ultimately what we're trying to do. So here I am. That's a little bit of my experience. My MPA program and what I learned through that program has been fundamental, because as Brendan mentioned, I find that the MPA program gives you all the MBA tools, but also has that sort of mission-driven, that sort of orientation on just opportunity and social justice and creating, you know, opening doors that the MBA program may not necessarily have. So I think it's the best of both worlds, and I am very, very glad, even though I'm still paying my student loans, I am very glad that I took on that opportunity at Suffolk. So.
Yeah. All right, so great. Yeah, that's a good career that you have going. I didn't mention that Mafe was born in Cali, Colombia, and I'm not sure when you came to the States, but earlier in life, and with the linkages and ties to her home country, I think that's the start of heading into NEACOL. So tell us a little bit about NEACOL and you know, its formation. I think you were fairly early in it.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, I am from Cali, Colombia. I think I would say if you meet any Colombian, we're tend to be very proud of being Colombian. I think on that scale, I kind of surpassed the level of pride. I am very, very proud of being Colombia. Colombia is sort of, I left Colombia, but Colombia never left me. Even when I was at Suffolk, I, you know, made sure that I sort of brought, I feel that being Colombian is part of who I am. And it doesn't matter whether it's at Suffolk as a student, or if it's in the middle of a board meeting, or at a leadership table, which is, I'm very blessed to be able to be in those spaces. bringing exactly who I am. I make sure that people know that I'm Colombian, that I come from such level of greatness, because I do believe that's where we come from. That's what my country and my culture in Latin America, especially, we come from greatness for sure. And I'm very much aware of that. So, and I pass that on to my kids all the time. So, but in terms of NEACOL, NEACOL was sort of a beautiful coincidence, for lack of a better word. One day I was looking through Facebook and I saw some pictures of a gala that they had. I had no idea what NACOL was, but just by looking at the mission, I was like, oh, interesting. New England Association for Colombian Children. That definitely caught my attention. Children to me has always been something that I failed to mention earlier. A lot of my career, even in the private sector, has been around education. Education is something that has been a tool for me as a recent immigrant. And I say recent because I think it's important for us to make that distinction that this is a nation of immigrants, right? Some of us just happen to get here a little later, but we're all immigrants. So as a recent immigrant, education was sort of the tool, or the key for me to be able to have a life of somewhat dignity and be able to provide for my family, not only here, but in Colombia as well. So education has always been at the core of my heart and sort of what I care about. And even if I'm not working in education, which I have, but right now I was searching for a connection, and NEACOL provided that. So as soon as I saw those pictures and became curious about what NEACOL does, I said I had to be part of that organization. So I'll tell you about NEACOL. NEACOL is the New England Association for Colombian Children. It's an organization, it's a nonprofit organization that came into existence in 2013. So we're about 9 years now. It's fully run and operated by volunteers, including myself. So the board members, all the way to every single person who volunteers for NEACOL, it's all volunteers. We don't have any paid staff. So all the funding that we receive goes directly to the organizations that benefit from the work that we do. The focus of NEACOL is to empower and change lives, provide better opportunities for children in Colombia. Our focus primarily is to reach those areas of Colombia, the most remote areas of Colombia where the big nonprofits don't get to, or the government assistance doesn't get to. That's where we try to, or aim to get to. We focus on the areas of education, nutrition, and health. And the way it works is that every 2 years we rotate sort of the emphasis of where our funding is going to go to. So this year, we're focusing on education with something that hasn't been fully announced yet, publicly announced, but I'll trust this group here. You get the premiere. We're actually going to focus on special education, which is something that is brand new for us, but it's definitely an area of education that's underserved in Colombia, and that requires much more research and definitely resources allotted to that. So we're sort of on the vanguard of that, and which is very exciting for us. The way that we do fundraising is actually very organic. We do a lot of events. Brandon has been part of some of those, like from photographs, having a photographer who's a volunteer, taking pictures, doing professional photos. And we, we just raise money through that effort. We actually have an event coming up on June 4th that I hope, if you're interested, I would love to see you all there. It's going to be at Peca, which is a Venezuelan restaurant in Brighton. And we're going to have music and food and an opportunity to kick off sort of the call for proposals. And what the call for proposal process is we reach out to organizations in Colombia and ask them to apply, invite them to apply for funding. Organizations that are, for this year, organizations that are focused on education and special education particularly. So this event in June is going to be sort of the announcement of what the focus of our year is going to be. and then, inviting people to help us, right? We depend solely on the support of people who believe in our mission, who want to make a difference. The work that we do makes a huge impact. I actually had the ability to travel to Colombia in this past February and see the work in action. The money that we've raised through, making phone calls, to our friends. I did a lot of harassing of my friends over our last campaign, a fundraising campaign, making sure that they donated. And that money actually changes lives. And I was able to see that firsthand. So that's a little bit about NACOL. Brendan, please let me know if I missed anything.
I think it's great. And I think we can show it, the several things, all volunteer, covering different areas. It does seem as though your team of committee members and such, it's about 20 total. And it looks like they cover different areas of expertise for you. Linking to Colombia and its needs. Is that something, Mafi, is that something does everyone kind of still follow what's going on back in Colombia, follow politics and follow, issues? You do understand that special needs is is not a rising concern, but an unaddressed concern. So that's just knowledge from the group, or is there anybody kind of specialized in linkage to the Colombian government, or?
Mm-hmm. So one of the good things, or at least something that I take quite a bit of pride on, is that for the organization, but definitely during my administration, if you want to call it that, which is up next year, we are not a government affiliated organization. We're not affiliated by any religious institution. We are just an organization of, Colombian friends and people, we call it Colombian friends, but it's actually, we have representation of different countries too. I mean, Brenda, you're an example of that, right? Like, you fell in love with Colombia, you fell in love with our mission. We're changing lives. We're literally changing lives. One of the things that we did this year is that we funded an aqueduct project where about 600 kids had access to drinking water. Now think about that for a second. Most of us take some of these things for granted. Drinking water, well, it's available to us. For some people, it isn't. And the impact of these projects is that it's not only impacting these children, the 600 children, but also their families and their health outcomes, right? So the impact is long lasting. Yes, it's 600 children now, but this is something that's going to be sustainable. So that's the kind of work that we're doing. We also have a project in the northern part of Colombia now that I actually got to visit. And, they're building a, oh my gosh, I'm losing the word in English now. That's what happens when you think in two languages.
I know it.
Huerta. It's like so people can grow their own food. And I'm losing the technical term for that, but nonetheless, this is a project where we trained the mothers of that community, of these kids at this particular school, to be able to, grow their own food. Again, the impact of these actions, of these projects, are not just the short term of that, feeding these children on this day. Is actually, we're building communities. We're developing communities in a way that the impact is going to be sustainable for a number of years. And this is just, you mentioned 2020 right now active. We have some people that come and go based on, life happens and people have jobs, and that's what happens. But ultimately, when we have a campaign, a fundraising campaign, we come together and with the support of those people, those volunteers, but also all the networks that come with those volunteers, we're able to make these things happen. So we actually have, the way that we're organized is we have 6 committees. We have a marketing committee, and they're the ones who focus, all volunteers, people with the marketing background, a communications background, or just an interest in that particular area. And they focus on our marketing, on our social media presence, on our website. And then we have a projects committee, and they are the ones that are focused on doing the research. These are people who have experience on nonprofit, working with nonprofits and research and data analytics, figuring out what are the needs, right? Before we even decide what the emphasis of our fundraising efforts is going to be, they do a lot of research. They come to the board, they come to the executive team, which I'm part of, and they make a recommendation based on data. They try to see, okay, where are the biggest needs? What are the, for example, with health, what was the impact of COVID on health outcomes and nutrition? And then, you know, based on those recommendations, then we decide, okay, yes, we're going to focus our efforts on this. So the projects committee it's sort of the heart of the organization in the way that they are the ones who do the research. They're the ones that determine what's going on, where are the areas where we can have a better impact as well, right? Because that's one of the things that we need to, given the scope of our work, given the limitations of how many volunteers we have in our budget, we want to make sure that whatever we decide is going to have a long-lasting impact. So that's sort of their function. They also go through the process, and I can explain that in further detail if it's helpful. But the way that we choose the organizations that we're going to support is through this call for proposals, where we do an announcement saying NEACOL is inviting nonprofits in Colombia. And we're not talking about, again, the big nonprofits. That's not where our focus is. Our focus is on those areas that are not covered by the nonprofits, those areas that are not receiving help from the government. That's where we go. That's where our impact lies. So we do a call for proposal, which brings us challenges, right? Because most of those nonprofits perhaps don't have access to technology. So we may not be able to reach them. So we work with other organizations to make sure that we get the word out. We create partnerships in Colombia to ensure that these nonprofits have access to this information that we're sharing, so they are able to apply. And then through that process, there's a criteria that by which we measure, you know, which are the nonprofits that will have the best impact. Like, what is it that they will do with the money that we would give them? So there's a whole selection process. There's a criteria that's been developed by the projects committee. And then ultimately the decision is made by the members, the active members of the organization. So it's all very organic. It's all very collective, very collaborative. And each volunteer has a voice. And for us, it's very important as well.
You know, just I'm glad you weren't thrown. I just wanted to show those few projects and give, beyond that, the website gives a great sense of the look of and feel of Colombia. You know, just very, very different from the States. What Mafe is bringing up about the water supply, just the things that we take for granted. And so it's tough where some of those videos are in Spanish. A couple are translated over to English to let you see more detail on the efforts. But it's interesting too that it only takes $12,000 to fund that water supply for an aldea, for a village. And so you think about that. I mean, I think that we have had the visit from Matt Durkin. He's a double ram too, Mafe. He runs a foundation out of Andover, and they give out tens of thousands of dollars per year, actually up to 300,000 total per year to fund probably 10 clients, a few clients, where this money goes a long ways abroad. You know, the $12,000 in Colombia can go a long ways and affect an awful lot of people. So the dollar figures is kind of a funny thing, that the raising of that money and how it can impact communities. Yeah, it's a different scale, but it does work. Yeah, do you guys have any questions of Mafe so far, and how the organization is doing what it does? Right. So you've got a couple of these forms of fundraising for that being the central activity to make sure a foundation that it does bring money back to Colombia. So yep, there was a great brunch. There's a soccer game. They got to a soccer game, was a fundraiser when we bought tickets to see the Revolution play somebody. A portion of that went toward the organization as well. And really nice way of bonding and getting the community together to talk through things. In addition, so even the photography thing that Javier Porero, he's a good professional photographer. And so he donated his time to go ahead and take pictures of families and in a park in the area, and anything that he raised went straight to NEACOL. So there's a few of them. But beyond that too, you guys have some corporate donors. I'll pull it back up the website, and you guys have some corporate sponsors. Is that just, how does that come together?
Absolutely. So I think, I think in any nonprofit, you have to build those partnerships with the corporate world. And part of that is having the ability to tell your love story, right, of your organization. And I see that both in my current role at North Shore Community Health, but also, I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in North Shore Community Health and why I mentioned that. We're trying to build a building. Right now, one of our clinics, our biggest clinic in Salem, it's in a building that it's pretty run down. It's not up to par with what our patients deserve. And I think, there's a certain dignity that comes with having a space that is equipped to give the best care. And we're in that process of fundraising for that new building. And we have to build those partnerships with, government institutions, but also with the corporate world. And NACOL is no stranger to that either. So we do have a number of corporate sponsors that we like to work with, just so we can, either to sponsor an event like the one on June 4th. One of our potential sponsors is going to be the New England Revolution. I think that was a clear connection. Colombians love, and I think in Latin America, we love soccer. We're a huge fans of soccer, and I think the New England Revolution sees that and understands that that's a great partnership to get, bridge that gap with the Latin American community here in the Boston area and the Commonwealth. So that's, we've been very fortunate to have that relationship. But we also had other, smaller corporate sponsors who believe in what we do, who have seen firsthand the impact that we have. And again, I just like to emphasize the level of transparency that happens in our operations. Every single dollar that goes into NACOL there's full transparency in terms of what happens with those dollars. There's definitely an accounting system where I, as the president and the treasurer, have full access to everything that happens. Nothing goes beyond us in terms of the finances, and every money, our operational budget is very limited. We try to, especially I'm more on the conservative side, because I like to make sure that that these kids get as much money as we can give them. So for example, if we have a get together or an event for our volunteers, I'm a big fan of doing a potluck or, donating the food, so we don't take any of those. So we minimize our operational costs for sure. But yeah, we have a sponsorship package, and we go in and tell our love story of NACOL to those corporate sponsors. And I think, we're very lucky that NACOL has such is a no-brainer, right? It's children, it's very basic needs. It's making, to Brendan's point earlier, fortunately for us, unfortunately for Colombia, our money is so devalued that the dollar goes such a long way. So whatever we are able to raise makes a huge difference there. So any donation, any sort of support from our corporate sponsors, even if it's a limited amount, the impact that it has is so astronomical that it works, and it just makes sense. So, but having that love story is very important. No matter where you work in nonprofits, you want to be ready to tell your story, and you want to believe it. You want to believe it. You want to believe in the mission, and I think you can really transfer that to others as you talk about what you do.
What's your favorite project, you think? Just what comes to mind is your favorite project that you've seen come off the ground and be built back in Colombia?
Oh my gosh, it's so hard to tell, because I have the I have the blessing of seeing these things firsthand. I get pictures, I get videos, and it's just my heart just, it just melts, because it's real. What we're doing is real. It's not, again, I can't emphasize enough, the operational costs for us are minimal. everything we've raised. And I can tell you because I see, I'm on the calls, I'm, saying, how are we going to fund this? How are we going to get more money for this? I'm calling my friends and telling them, you haven't made a donation. I'm watching. I need you to, you say you were going to donate $25, $10, whatever it is. So having seen that firsthand from the ground up, and then seeing the impact of these things, it's really key. But my favorite, the aqueduct system, allowing the opportunity for children and their families to have drinking water. To me, that's such a basic need. And it's something that someone who's very passionate about social justice kind of gets me mad that we have to, in a way that organizations like NAACOL need to exist. But it also makes me happy that I have that avenue to carry out this passion for something that just seems so basic. And being part of that, it's really, there's no words to describe that.
Thinking you're starting to nudge me a little bit about involvement, so Maria Mafia is nice and gentle about nudging, she's not pushy and forceful.
Yes.
We'll say that it's like, how about a little bit of, there we go. Hey, Anton, go ahead. You have a question.
Yeah, so I know that in Latin America there are a lot of like big problems, and I know you're focusing on various of them. How do you decide which ones are you focusing? And is it difficult to manage all of them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, I think that being aware of the needs and sort of the gaps in support and sort of responsibility, I have this understanding that governments should, support the needs of the people. And it sounds like such a big, but a utopian thing, but it's actually a very realistic thing. And when that sort of those gaps of inequities are there, it's frustrating, right? And that's why organizations like NAACOL need to emerge and really have an impact. We struggle with that. We struggled with that because the need is so big. So for example, at the last call for proposals we had last year, where the focus was health, the impact of COVID in health and nutritional health. So it was a very specific topic, and that topic comes as a result of research, right? Where are we seeing the biggest gaps? Where are the areas where we really need to emphasize? And that's why we sort of are very specific with our scope. So that way the responses that we get or the projects proposals that we get are going to be in response to that very specific goal that we're trying to accomplish or trying to address. So it's all based on research. It's all based on research. And we had about 27 people, 27 organizations respond to our call for proposals. We were only able to fund 3. So that's a big project. A lot of thought and intention comes into that. We have a criteria, as I mentioned earlier, on how to select the organizations, and the members are the ones who end up voting where we're going to send our funds to. But sending those letters, personally, I'm the one who sends the rejection letters, if you had to call them that. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because you know that every decision that we make is impacting the lives of humans. This is not something that's completely removed from our understanding, but we're so close to what we're doing because we're a small nonprofit that we know what the impact of that, what the decision is. So it's definitely heartbreaking. There's so much that I wish we could do. And I see us as, in terms of our strategic planning and our growth, I can't wait for us to get to a point where we can even help even more. But we depend on the help of people like you all who hear our mission, who hear our love story, and who want to join us in really changing the lives of these children in any way, right? In any capacity, was volunteering, was donating, whether it's participating in our events. We have some parties. We also have, I'm a Zumba instructor on the side just for fun because I love dancing. And we do like Zumba-thons, for example. And I've done a couple of those and all of these things that are very true to our culture too, because we like to keep it, community. We like to keep that partnership, that familiar. I call the team, NAACOL family. Our events also reflect that, but also we find ways. We had a chef, for example, recently to help us do, for Valentine's Day, we had like a dessert, you know, recipe, and we had a chef who was doing that. All of these things again are to raise funds, but ultimately I'm hoping that we can get to a point where we can address more need, but that's sort of the process that we currently follow.
Audrey.
Yeah, so when you pick out a topic for like 2 years, is there like a action plan you follow, like steps that you go through? And also, how did you come to the decision to focus on special education?
It's all based on research. It's all based on research and where the needs are. We also keep a pulse of what's going on by those partnerships that we have in Colombia. But it's all research based, like the projects committee. So what they do is the bulk of their work is doing the call for action, call for proposals, and then the selection process. Once they do the selection process in collaboration with the rest of the volunteers, then they start the process for next year. Because once we select those organizations, then the rest of us have to go and find the money, right? So it's a cycle where the heaviness of the work is focused like the earlier part of the year. So that's what they're doing now. They already have done the research. They came with a recommendation that we should focus on education, especially special education. And then after that, we need to vote on that. The board votes on that. And then we go out and start raising money. That's why we're having our first event on June 4th and hoping to kick us off all through the end of the year so we can then be able to fund those projects.
That team of about 20 on those across the committees, I was blown away. It's a pretty elite group, really. I think that there are some serious business leaders in that group, organization leaders like Mafe, a few other organizations. So it's really capable group. So they if you specialize into these different areas and do that bit of research, so the research is done by the team. That was a team of volunteers once again, but bright and high capacity across that board to know what's going on back in Colombia. Yeah, that does fit. It strikes me, Mafe, as well, that it's almost like there's a bit of a cycle to your efforts too, that more goes on in the fall than in the spring. Maybe there was the Valentine's Day event, but otherwise it seems like it's a lot between, say, June and the end of the year. Even end of last year, there was the crowdfunding effort to raise money. So maybe that's a good way for a volunteer organization to work is, you take a little breather and then you ramp back up again for half a year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what happens. I mean, I think the crowdfunding events, which it was about 6 weeks in November through December, that's intense because we have a goal. Yeah. We have a goal and we're making phone calls and we're, saturating social media and, we're doing everything possible to literally just harassing people to give us money. I know I did that. So it's very intense. And then think about like a race, you're trying to get to this goal and we were lucky enough to surpass our goal last year, which is great, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of emotional energy to do that. And then you just need that breather and then you start planning for the next year. Part of the reason why the efforts are concentrated on the later part of the year, this year is going to be a little earlier, is because we're waiting to see where those funds are going to go. Usually it's better when you're fundraising to tell people exactly where the money is going. That transparency is key for us. And although, I am a big fan of fundraising throughout the year because ultimately our mission doesn't change. Our mission is to change lives just through different venues or different emphasis, right? Different focus areas. But ultimately the mission of NEACOL continues to be the same. So, that message is continuous throughout the year. But as we get closer to the point where we have a decision of where the funding is going to go, it actually presents a better message for us. As we're going to corporate sponsors, as we're going to people like you all who, guess what, this year we're going to be supporting this project that is going to have an impact on this amount of children in this particular area. So you can actually go and see and feel, you know, what this will mean. So from a fundraising perspective, it just makes more sense to have that clear understanding of where the money is going, even if it's $10, $5, whatever it is, everything makes a difference for us, especially as we talked about the dollar going such a long way in Colombia.
I don't know, is a group of students, if you guys are involved in crowdfunding yourselves yet, but you know, a very interesting process there that last November, December. I watched it up close. I think that there's plenty of competitive spirit among this group of people. So I'm not naming names, but I might live with someone who is like, wait a minute, I gotta go. She's making more money than I am. I better get out there and raise a bit more. Yeah, so it did have some good excitement to have the 20 odd people with their totals for how much they're raising. Ooh, she's raised a lot. I better get more. So that was nice to see, you just inspiring each other on crowdfunding. Do you guys have experience, students? Do you guys have experience on doing that for Suffolk at all? Anybody not yet? Yeah, it's a nice tactic, a nice technique, nice tactic for that. What was the goal, Mafia? How'd you guys do?
Yeah,
yeah,
we had we put a goal that we thought would be reachable. So 30,000 was our goal. Mm-hmm. We had some leftover money from the previous year, so that was going to be enough, and we ended up doing like 42,000. So yeah. It was, but it's, I'm telling you, it doesn't, like, we don't have, you know, paid staff that are going to be making call. We don't have that. This is all organic. This is all people who, while they're cooking or while they're, you know, whatever, at the gym working, whatever, they're making calls and saying, hey, you know, I need you to donate for this. This is what this is going to do. Like, just personal relationships, connections. That's how we make it happen.
Yeah. So, you know, I one thing out of this that you know, Mafia has fallen into over time, and you guys are a part of now, that I keep raising, is just this notion of networks. You know, that Suffolk, its real asset is to connect people and create networks. So, you know, Mafia's network has grown tremendously through these years of relationship with Neocall, and mine has because of that as well. Just within the last whatever it would be, 7 odd months since getting to know the group. So that's something, I don't know if students, you'd consider that for a cause in your own community, you know, that it can build, if it's and as Mafia is raising gaps in what the Colombian government does. You learn that it just handles certain things, but not other things. So can we fill in on that? It's true for communities as well, for communities in Massachusetts. Anton, who asked the question, he's from Chihuahua, Mexico. You know, that there's gaps there, and so it is your own stepping up that can help in your own community.
I also, Brandon, sorry to interrupt you. I forgot to mention that NECO also has helped children here in the United States, in the Boston area, children of Colombian children. So, for example, during the pandemic. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like the pandemic is over, but like the core, like the hearts, you know, most still, I mean, whatever it is, I don't even know like what we can call what we are now. It's such a, you know, ambiguous time for sure and ever changing. But in 2020, NECO helped an organization called Emmaus in East Boston, which services Colombian children as well. So the impact is not limited to just children in Colombia, but Colombian children here too. One of the things that I'm hoping that we can do, it could or may not or not happen during my administration, but my love story with Nicole does not end when my time as president ends. I'm hoping that we can expand our impact in the Colombian community, in the Latin American community, really, with children, you know, recent immigrant children from Colombia, maybe people like you all, people like me, right, who had the opportunity to attend college and can talk about what that is, because sometimes those children may not have that sort of point of reference or someone who can tell them how to navigate the process or, you know, what it's like. So having, you know, those mentorships and role models, and, you know, that's important too. There's a lot of work that we can do to support Colombian children in the United States, in our area, in our community. So definitely, and it's not, again, not limited just to Colombian children, but just community, developing communities as a whole, right? There are, even in the United States, as we all know, there are a lot of gaps. That's the reason why, you know, these nonprofits need to exist, to address the gaps and sort of change the landscape of equity, right? I think a lot of us who care about social justice and see these things, these are the avenues to make a difference. So I would just say seize those opportunities, and NECOL is definitely trying to be an active participant in that.
That, you know, Mafia, we haven't talked about this yet, but this is something where I'm hoping that Suffolk will have its role, that here with the broad swath of nonprofit management teaching, our first focus was actually on the arts institutions. And so several of the students are arts administration minors, studying theater, studying fine arts, but also then learning management capacity. But I think our next best growth area for the program, and I think hopefully I'll gauge the group of students here on your interest next week, doing this for internationally focused organizations. So far, I just have 3 identified. There's one in the Dominican Republic, Lazos Al Futuro, which is from an ex-student. And then Mike Horton, associated with NECOL, he works for Mustard Seed Foundation, which actually serves this way in Africa, especially, but in other nations as well. So that's our hope, is us here in Boston, managing this effort to do good abroad. And that's the hope of our growth area. And Mafia, we'll keep in touch on that just to see how we can work that. As we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Mafia is interested in bringing on interns, more for NECOL or for North Shore?
Both.
Okay.
I mean, definitely, you know, there's someone out there who's interested in HR, DEI, that's sort of what I do. So I love, and anyone who has ever reported into me, anyone who has worked with me, I love to help people grow, because I had those opportunities as well. So I'm the type of person that I share everything that I know. I want the people around me to know as well. So if anyone is interested in getting into the world of HR, employment law, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, definitely let me know. But in terms of, that's for my day job, but in terms of NECOL, if anyone is interested in social justice, if anyone is interested in, you know, how change happens, you know, how you can be a change agent in things that just seem like so wrong with the world, NECOL, it's a perfect opportunity to do something like that, because you'll see how these things happen, you know, from the ground up, right? Like how this change happens, you know, organically with people who are also interested in making life a little bit better, more just for kids who deserve everything, just like anyone else. So happy to, you know, if you're passionate about that, if you watch the news, if you see what's going on and you're like, oh, yeah, like that doesn't feel right to me, and you want to be able to make a difference, more than happy to talk to you about NECOL and what we're doing, and really show you the impact that we're having, because again, we're a small nonprofit, and we're able, in that smallness, we're able to see the impact so clearly, and so transparently, that it will be rewarding and fulfilling by all means. So.
Yeah, you know, on that, so we think about what NECOL has developed so far. You know, first off, we mentioned it has this great cadre of dedicated people, and people rotate off that. Others will come on. Did mention actually one of the most impressive people I think I've met on the board is, I forget Beatrice's last name. She's the consul general for Ecuador, for the Ecuadorian government. She's the consul here in here, and so yeah, there's some very, very neat people, and so that's a good body of people. Next, you can take a look at that website, and you can see it's beautiful. You know, it's nicely done. It's interesting challenges like with the videos, and that I've already pointed out to you. You know, can we get those in English so they get a broader, you know, viewership? But Mafe, what is the next big management challenge, do you think, for you for NECOL? What do you want to grow into?
Mm-hmm. We want to increase our impact. I think, you know, one of the challenges that from an employer perspective, but also from a volunteer organization is talent, right? You know, even in an organization like North Shore, where, you know, we hire people to do the work, right now, a lot of employers are finding it hard to find talent, right? Where it's a lot of competition for talent right now. It's a candidates market for sure. And then if you add the complexity of having unpaid talent, that's even more challenging, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of just, you know, uncertainty. We're living challenging times. We really are. And having people's commitment to do this work, it's tough because they're competing with a lot of priorities. So that's the biggest challenge. But in terms of opportunities, the impact, expanding our impact in the community here, I think that is also, you know, we have the ability to see the impact of our work in Colombia through pictures and videos, but I can only imagine how deeper that could even be or become if we're doing it here, if we're seeing it firsthand, if our volunteers are able to help children here and build those relationships with them. I mean, I think it doesn't get even closer than that. So that's sort of where I would love to see Nicole growing.
It's the mission. It still is consistent with the mission to you're helping kids and kids of this identity. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions, folks? I do want to shift one little bit to think about, and you just inspired me to think about it. So you've done diversity, equity, and inclusion work now for about a decade. It's sort of, or maybe longer. I forget. Yeah, about that. That's about right. But it's sort of ramped up around 2020. It got much more attention. So how has that work changed? And what is it for North Shore? So you're mainly after diversifying the workforce for North Shore Community Health, but also is it also like making sure you're focused on equity for client service as well? Where does it go, and how does that work for you?
Mm-hmm. So my work around diversity, equity, and inclusion focuses on the employment aspect of things. So we want to make sure that everyone, that we have policies and practices that are inclusive of everyone's needs and who they are, that they can bring their whole selves to the workplace. And that's something that a lot of organizations, you know, like to say that they do, and especially, you know, with the racial reckoning that happened in 2020, you know, for whatever reason, a lot of organizations didn't realize that there was racism in this country. That is pretty much, you know, a strong foundation of the history of the United States. So, but for whatever reason, that was a shaky moment that really moved a lot of companies to action, to the point that the language has turned into more anti-racism versus diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's sort of the focus that of my work in the scope of employment. So making sure that there aren't any barriers to entry, meaning in recruitment, making sure that our policies do not discriminate or have a disparate impact or a negative impact on any particular community. But the conversation, and this is actually one of the beautiful things about working at a nonprofit, because you're working in the community, in benefit of the community. These conversations around anti-racism and inclusion, when it comes to services, are just so natural and so seamless that it's part of the narrative, right? Because you're working for the community, and the community is diverse and has those needs, and we're trying to build those bridges of equity gaps. So these conversations, which perhaps, you know, in another sector would be more, perhaps less of ingrained in the DNA or the day-to-day narrative, in nonprofits, they're part of the conversation naturally, because that's sort of the work.
That's a great point. You know, I think I've talked to these students about when you work for the federal government or the state government, even when you're at MBTA, you know, you don't see results very quickly. You put in place some kind of a plan that could take 5 or 10 years or whatever. My work, I don't know if you remember, it was in local government, and you know, we planned that library, and there it is a year later. You know, we troop things out pretty quickly. For a nonprofit, it's almost immediate. You know, that what's being done well or poorly, you do see that immediately in a community, in the communities that are served by North Shore. So Salem, Peabody, and Gloucester as your 3 communities. How do you think? How's it going for the diversity of the organization?
Mm-hmm. It's actually one of the reasons why I joined the organization.
Yeah.
It's very diverse.
Yeah.
We hire Spanish-speaking candidates because that's Spanish-speaking Portuguese, and also other, but those are the two main languages that are spoken by our patients. And the majority of our staff, speak those languages. So is definitely a change from other organizations where I worked before. And I love the opportunity to be in the senior HR seat, right? And making decisions for people whose backgrounds and whose stories are very similar to mine. So representation matters. And to me, it's such a blessing to be able to be in those spaces.
Good. How's the ability to kind of create incentives to encourage people to join North Shore? Is that something you're able to do? It seems like some of that funding came through the CARES Act and all that, but do you guys have any good incentives to get folks on board?
We do. We have sign-on bonuses for a nonprofit. And I think there's this misconception sometimes of nonprofits not being able to compete with private sector, salaries and benefits. In some ways that is true. But I think for a nonprofit, I think we have a very generous competitive benefits package, which include like tuition remission. So those are things that attract staff to us. But I think ultimately, if I had to say the number one value proposition we offer our candidates is the mission. Is the mission by far. A community health center sees those patients who are not seen other places. We strive to really just offer quality care, no matter what your insurance situation is. And that's important. And that's making a huge difference in the lives of people. If you think about it, if the pandemic didn't teach us anything, it taught us that, health is the most important thing for us, right? Like if we don't have health, we don't have anything else. And it extends beyond just that person, but also families, right? So being able to, take care of those who are entrusting their care to us, who perhaps don't have any other options, right? To a community health center comes as a response to that, to the health equity gaps that our current structures, have in place. So that's the reason why a lot of people work for us, is the mission by far.
Very good. All right. Well, last chance, folks. We're gonna, for any questions, even on North Shore, and we've had the 2-for-1 today. That's nice, and so you get that contrast of different nonprofit leadership that we have. The fellow who's running almost on his own a little foundation to serve north of Boston. We get that's Matt Durkin. We get Rick Doan running Interfaith Social Services of Quincy, staff of about 5 or 6 regulars, then some counseling contractors, then some people running a food bank and a food pantry and a thrift shop, services there. Now we get Mafi taking us in these other couple of directions of all volunteer serving, mostly abroad, mostly internationally, as well as her own day-to-day life in the management of an organization. So yeah, we've had a great, and I appreciate your filling us in on these 2 last areas for the class, Mafi, almost bookends of having a mission-driven life, and really good. In addition to raising those 3 guys, So thank you so much for coming in today to join us. And folks, we got a little clapping. You can clap for real, or you can clap with your
thank you
reaction thing. Yeah, we got thumbs up. Oops, we got a thumbs up, whatever. Right, all good. So yeah, that's it for today, folks. And I'll stop the recording now. And